Disc jockey Alan Herzig is suing former clients Bonnie and Paul Moorer for putting a stop payment on his fee. Bonnie is countersuing, claiming Alan slandered her.
Come to order, all rise. Quiet in the courtroom, all rise. Miss. Now, this is case number 129 on the calendar in the matter of Herzig versus Moorer. Party's been sworn in, Judge. You may be seated. Everybody have seats.
Mr. Herzig, you were retained by Mr. and Mrs. Moorer, according to your complaint,
Yes,
to
ma'am.
be the DJ at their son's bar mitzvah.
Correct.
They gave you a $500 deposit,
Correct.
the balance due of $650. According to your complaint, you went to the bar mitzvah, you performed your service, the Moorers gave you a check for $650,
Correct.
and then they stopped payment on the check.
Yes, ma'am.
You want your money.
Yes.
Mr. and Mrs. Moorer say that your services were not up to standard, that they feel as if they didn't get what they had contracted for, that you ruined their son's bar mitzvah. In addition to ruining their son's bar mitzvah, you slandered and defamed them by writing letters to the temple, by walking around with placards outside. I don't know what you said. And they're suing you for a refund of their $500 deposit, as well as another $4,500 for their aggravation.
Correct.
Okay. Where was the bar mitzvah?
Desert Shores Community Center, the same location that my young witness had his bar mitzvah.
Okay. And how many people did you have at the bar mitzvah?
Approximately 100.
When did you retain Mr. Herzig?
Approximately 2 months before,
Okay.
2 to 3 months before the event.
Do you have the contract?
Yes, ma'am.
I'd
It
like to
was
see it,
actually December 16th, 2004.
And when was the bar mitzvah?
January 30th, 2005.
Okay. Would you show this to Mr. and Mrs. Moore and ask them whether they recognize signature on that and whose signature it was on the contract?
Yep, I have the same one in my...
Yes.
Okay, so that's the contract.
Yes.
Oh. And you showed up.
Absolutely. Ready to do a job.
Showed up, and how many hours were you there?
I arrived at 4 o'clock p.m. Set up time from 4 o'clock to 5:30. At 5:30, start music.
And when did you finish?
9:30.
Between 5:30 and 9:30, did anyone approach you and indicate that they were dissatisfied with what was going on?
Ms. Moore came up and said, I'm unhappy the music being played right now. It was during the dinner time. And I said, no problem. We'll promptly change it, which we did.
So other than that one time that Mrs. Moore came up to you during the course of the evening, did either of them come up and say that there was anything wrong with what you were doing?
Later on at about 8:40, maybe 9 o'clock, Ms. Moore came up and asked, she had given me originally that evening 4 additional notes to perform and to say, as I remember, something about one of them being guest had graduated from college. But there were a couple, how about those announcements? And I said, we've already made the announcements. I didn't know if she was in the room.
Can
Yes.
I add to that?
I'm going to get to you
Okay.
in a second. Okay. When did you get your check for $650?
After we put the equipment back into the van, we sat down at the table with Ms. Moore, and we requested our check, and we started just kibitzing a little about the evening, and that was it.
She gave you the check.
Yes, ma'am. Wrote the check right then and there.
Did she say at that point anything to you about your service that evening?
Word zero, which
Okay. Don't tell me what he's going to tell me.
Okay.
You say word zero.
Word zero.
Okay, who's going to speak?
I'd like to say.
Okay.
Okay. When I originally hired Alan to be my DJ, I had interviewed a few DJs. And one mentioned that he was going to have a disco ball for lighting, which, you know, I would like for my son to have something special. And he said, oh, that's outdated. I have sophisticating lighting. I have speakers with that blink, and I have, you know, and I was excited because I thought, wow, I'm going to have that. That was not at the party. That's what initially, after I watched the tape of the bar mitzvah, or it was even before then, I said to my husband, was there lighting? And there was no lighting. The montage that he made for me, that he was professionally supposed to do.
I don't know what. Could you stop
A
hitting the
montage.
table?
I'm sorry.
At the table.
The montage of
A video montage that he supplied a projection screen that he told me he was going to add magic to. I scanned all the pictures at home on my computer and handed him a disc. He just added music to it, and he told me he was going to spin the pictures and do his magic to my pictures. And I have a copy of that here that I'd like you to see. That within the first 4 pictures, there was a slag in between the pictures. As a professional, after making a tape of this sort, he should have viewed it before he showed it to my guests. There was a slag, and everybody thought the tape was over after the first 4 pictures.
The sound system was inadequate. We had music cues for people as they were to come out and be introduced that never went off. We didn't know he was going to have a 12-year-old child as his DJ, training
told me he
him
was gonna have an
at our
assistant.
bar mitzvah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
He said he would bring an assistant. We didn't know it would be a young child that he would be given on-the-job training during our
he
affair.
trained his son throughout the.
So
I have it on tape also.
that was quite embarrassing for us, and our guests couldn't believe it. We had certain music that he left at
my
home.
My father was an entertainer who had passed, and I wanted my family to hear my father's music while we're eating. I brought the tape. He didn't even bring it to the bar mitzvah. He had to call his wife to bring the tape to the bar mitzvah.
did she bring it?
She brought it, but it was stressful for me.
Now you've told me the story.
Some of it.
Shh. Now you've told me the story, and now I'd like to know why you gave him a check for $650 at the end of the evening.
My husband wrote.
First of all, he's not telling the truth. I'm the one that gave him the check, not my wife.
I don't care who gave me the check. You gave me the check.
He came over. He said, it's time to settle up. We still had guests around. I didn't want to cause a scene. It was a very big day, a lot of excitement. Took out my checkbook. I wrote him the check just to get it over with. And we went home and discussed it, and we got several complaints from guests. People called us. They emailed us. They told us the next day or two how awful things were.
I want to see those emails. Just a second. Listen to me very carefully, Mr. Mora. I want to see the emails from your guests telling you how awful the bar mitzvah was.
I have.
Okay.
I'd like to see them.
Okay.
You have those letters?
Those are some letters, but I want her to read.
I want to see a letter.
I'll give it to them.
I just want to see an email. Oh, this is terrible. This is not what I want.
Okay.
This is not what I want. And this is not what I want. And this is not what I want. Did you understand English? English is, I want to see emails that your guests sent to you the day after the bar mitzvah telling you how horrible the bar mitzvah was. These are letters.
Okay.
These are letters 6 months later that you solicited from people saying, I was present at the Mora bar mitzvah and would like to make some comments about what I observed.
Well, she just printed it out that day.
Listen to me, madam. On your best day, you're not as smart as I am on my worst day.
Judge Judy continues in a moment. Alan Herzig says former client Bonnie Moore owes for his DJ services. Bonnie claims Alan did a poor job. She is countersuing for defamation of character.
What I want to see is a guest at a bar mitzvah, because I've been to more bar mitzvahs in my day than you have, and I've made more.
Okay.
I have never had a guest that wrote me a letter or sent me an email telling me how horrible the function was because of the DJ. So when you said to me, I got emails the next day telling me how horrible the function was,
I didn't say
that's not true. That's not true.
Don't argue with him.
No guest at a Jewish bar mitzvah tells their host and hostess what a terrible time they had. Now, solicited, you can get letters from people telling you that they thought that the DJ was awful. Call a guest and say, I'm going to court, and I want you to tell me, or I'm having a discussion or a dispute with it. Put your hand down. You tell me one Bubba Misa. You know what that means?
Yes.
Good. You tell me one Bubba Misa, I find everything else that you say suspect. So that's a grandma story.
Oh, I know the Bubba Misa.
That's a Bubba Misa, grandma story. It means it's an untruth. It means what grandmas tell when they tend to fabricate. So nobody wrote you the next day or 2 days later or 3 days later what a terrible time they had at your son's bar mitzvah because of the music.
Your Honor, excuse me.
Don't speak to me yet.
Okay.
So the answer to the question is, you gave him a check the day of the bar mitzvah because you didn't want to create a scene at the bar mitzvah. And then you were talking amongst yourselves. Not because you got emails from anybody the next day, because that's a lie, or the day after that, and you decided to stop payment on the check, right?
Right.
Now, after you stopped payment on the check, Mr. Herzig called you.
Right.
When you called him, what did Mr. Mora tell you?
My wife was unhappy with your performance.
And?
And we are not paying you, and we don't want to hear from you again. We've dusted our hands of you.
Was that the end of the conversation?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have any subsequent conversation with him?
I tried to.
So what did you do, Mr. Herzig? Because that's the second part of their complaint for which they want $4,500.
I sent them eventually I sent them an email. I left messages. I'm
not talking about what you sent to them. They are complaining that you slandered them.
I sent them an email. That was the slander.
He wrote letters to all the religious leaders in the community with this case.
You have copies of the letters? And just a second. Do you have copies of the letters that he sent?
I have one copy with CC's underneath.
Fine. I'd like to see it.
This was registered to me.
Okay.
He also sent a letter to the owner of the Israelite, which is the Jewish paper here in Las Vegas. I have a letter also from...
He carried a picket sign in front of our school, religious school.
Just a second.
Okay.
Is this what you're talking about? This...
He sent that whole package.
Just a second.
Yes.
This says...
He sent that to Mike, the owner.
Okay. And it says, how about a headline like Bonnie and Paul Morris stiffed their MC DJ?
Yes.
Well, that's what you did.
Okay.
That's what you did.
Okay.
You wrote
I
him a
don't think
check.
that he should be
Listen to me.
telling
You wrote him a check.
the newspaper that.
You listen to me. You wrote him a check, and then you stopped payment on the check. That means he got stiffed.
Disc jockey Alan Herzig claims client Bonnie Moore owes for services rendered. Bonnie is countersuing, claiming Alan slandered her.
Mr. Herzig says in this letter that he spent substantial time in your house helping you get the pictures scanned. Is that true?
He agreed that I told him I just bought the scanner. He agreed to come over and
So
do that.
it's-
But he just showed me how to do it.
Just
I
a
already
sec.
knew. Go ahead.
Listen to me. The answer is he came over to your house, which is not contained in this contract, to help you scan the pictures
Well, I
into a
scanned them all.
scanner. Not contained in here. He did it because he was being...
Yes, he was. Very nice to do that. Although his price
Fine.
was outrageous to begin with anyway.
Mrs. Herzog, that's an untruth. He was charging you $1,150 to perform at your event, which included this montage of pictures. And if you're telling me that that's an outrageous price, you should have hired somebody else. I'm telling you it's not an outrageous price.
Okay. Well-
Okay. And I'm still trying to find slander worth slander at all.
I don't think any of my business should be brought to the attention of my four rabbis he sent it to in the newspaper.
God, listen, what you think is one thing. He could have been a nice person and not sent it to anybody else. But he chose not to do that. That's not actionable.
Going to the school at checkout time with a poster that says I owe him money, and I have a letter here from the receptionist.
Listen to me.
Did you want to
He
read
has a
that?
right. I'm not looking at a letter. He has a right to do that. You do owe him money. That's not libelous. That's something that's untrue. You do owe him money.
Okay. I
if you
believe
owed
he did
him-
a job. I think it was inferior.
Just a second. Then you don't use him again. Let us say that you go out for a meal, Mrs. Mora, with your husband and your family, and you go to a new restaurant, and you eat at the restaurant. You finish everything on your plate, and you get back in your car that evening, and you say, you know, they advertise this restaurant as having the best ribs in town. And the truth is, I don't like those ribs as well as I like the rib guy at the end of the street. So I played by credit card, and I'm going to cancel my credit card, despite the fact that I ate the ribs, paid the bill, and I didn't like the way the waiter spoke to me, so I'm going to cancel that charge on my credit card. You think you'd get very far, Mrs. Mora? Zero. So if you don't like the restaurant, the next time you're going out for dinner, go someplace else. It's not as if Mr. Herzog didn't show up. It's not as if you got somebody else to play instead of him. You allowed him to start at 5:30, finish at 9:30. I am absolutely 100% positive that people clapped to the music, danced if they danced to the music.
They didn't.
Were on the dance floor. Maybe not everybody. Some people were on the dance floor during the course of the event. In any event, you used his services. You ate his ribs. When you stopped payment on his check, you had no right to do that. You stiffed him. You stole his money. And then you said, you don't like it? Sue me. Which is what he's doing. He wanted to embarrass you. I assume he embarrassed you. That's too bad. What he was saying is true. He's allowed to embarrass you. You have anything else you want to say?
Yes, how about he promised me the lighting system, the sound system was bad. I have on tape.
No, madam, I want you to take a look at your contract. And I want you to show me in your contract where it's in the contract.
No,
Listen to me. That's what you are bound by.
Okay.
The four corners of the contract. I want you to show me, Miss Mora, in the contract where it says that he's going to supply you with a lighting system.
Well, how about the sound system here?
Listen to me. I said, show me in the contract, in the four corners of the contract, where he says he's going to supply you with a lighting system.
That was my mistake, not having him write it, I guess.
You're absolutely right. What kind of business are you in, sir?
Hotel.
What kind of business in the hotel?
Casino.
What do you do in the casino?
I'm a department manager.
Okay. You know about contracts?
A little bit.
Good. Well, you have to explain that to your wife, sir. Anything that's within the four corners of the contract, or what courts consider if you sue him. If you said to me he didn't show up until 7 o'clock, and I find that he didn't show up until 7 o'clock, that means he gets docked. The fact that you didn't like the ribs is, as we say in French, that. Next time, you have another bar mitzvah that you're planning? Don't use Mr. Herzog. He doesn't want you to use him. They owe you $650.
Yes, ma'am.
Judgment for the plaintiff and your counterclaims dismissed. That's all.
Thank you.
What is your excuse? You may step out.